Big hello to all the listeners of Spodek Tajemnic.
This is Spodek Tajemnic. Now we are talking with Dom Beken from Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets in Katowice before the show. Dom, how your collaboration with Nick has started?
I've got a long kind of connection with the guys from Pink Floyd through my friend Guy Pratt. In fact, Guy and I started working together as long ago, I think 1998, something like that. So I've known Nick for a long time, and I've met David before, and the one person I hadn't actually met was Nick. I mean, I'd done a lot of work with Rick before he sadly passed away, and it was actually Lee who came up with the idea of putting this band together, and came up with the idea, well, look, let's not do the same songs that everybody else is playing, that obviously Roger and David are playing, and so many of the tribute bands are also playing, but wouldn't it be great if Nick went out and did something different from everybody else? And I met Lee actually at Guy's 50th birthday party, and Guy wanted to have a big jam session in a theatre in Brighton with all of his music friends, and I was invited along, and Lee was helping to organise it all. So Lee and I met there, where I was playing keyboards, and I played Arnold Lane with Guy and David as well, which was really good with David Gilmour, yeah. So when the idea came up to put the band together, I think they were thinking, who would be good for a keyboard player. My name came up. Obviously, I know both Guy and Lee, so that was how it kind of came together. So literally, we met in a tiny little rehearsal room in West London. I think Nick certainly didn't bring his own drum kit. I think I can't even remember if he remembered to bring a pair of sticks, but it was it was very much not massive prog rock star territory. It was very much back to the beginning and just jamming and seeing if it would work. Yeah, so I really remember the first day, and that's your next question, isn't it?
I'm sorry.
I'm sure
it's all transparent. So
could you tell us what kind of boss or manager is Nick? Is he directive or gives you freedom?
The commander, as we call him, is hysterical. I don't think he likes being in charge. I think he likes being in a band. He's brilliant. I mean, he's great. I mean, the idea of doing this early stuff is that, unlike the later Pink Floyd stuff, which really got set in stone, when they were playing in this era, there was a lot of improvisation. They were finding their way. There was a lot of freedom in the way that they played, and they could interpret the songs in different ways. So Nick's vibe has really been, let's just take the songs as songs and play them how we feel they ought to be played in this day and age, from modern audience, because the instruments have moved on so much, and PA systems have moved on so much, and effects have moved on so much. So he's just really great fun to play with, and is really open to everybody having suggestions and playing it how they like to play it. It's a great band to play in because it really feels creatively like a team effort. Obviously, we like to defer to Nick. He's a little bit older than all of us, and he's Nick Mason. So.
If you had to choose your favorite song from that period, pre-Dark Side of the Moon, what would it be?
That's really hard. I never really have favorite songs, just because they all bring something really quite different. I mean, I guess only about probably 20% of our set was from the Syd Barrett era, and those have got that really beautiful English whimsical side to them, which is so different from the later Pink Floyd. So I really enjoy playing those. I think See Emily Play is now in the right place in the set as part of the encore. That's just such a great fun song to play, that huge piano glitz going into the last chorus, and I really enjoy that. But as a keyboard player, I love playing Saucerful of Secrets. It's one of those things where Rick really experimented with his classical training, and that chord sequence is phenomenal, and I still kind of quite figure out how he wrote it. It changes key every 3 or 4 chords, but yet it's still really easy to follow and lends itself to so many lovely melodies. So I've had loads of fun with that, listening to lots of different versions that Rick played. And what's lovely is, in playing Rick's parts, is that he improvised so much. As the one member of Pink Floyd, rarely kind of stuck to the script every single show. So you can listen to Saucerful of Secrets, and there's got to be 10, or maybe at least 15 different versions I've heard of him improvising on organ for that. So just listening through and picking up little bits of melodies that he played here and there, and putting all my favourite bits together, and then joining them up by putting a bit of me into what I'm playing as well, is loads of fun. And of course, Obscured by Clouds is a lot of fun.
Talking about Saucerful of Secrets, I saw that you sampled piano for
Yes, I did.
this
Yeah.
piece, yeah?
Yeah,
It was
so
somewhere in YouTube.
Yeah, well, for Rats and the Piano, I think Rick used a treated piano for that. So I actually had an upright piano at home, so I just took the thing to pieces and then put some microphones around it and just sampled me playing loads of different notes with nails, scissors, screwdrivers, plucking them, running bits of colanders across them, anything I could, and then made that into a playable instrument. But it actually goes across the whole of my master keyboard and the smaller 61 note controller keyboard above. So when we do Rats and the Piano, I've got loads of fun to play with on that.
It's very impressive. It sounds brilliant.
If there were opportunity to play other songs from Pink Floyd catalog, but not only Pre-Dark Side, would you choose something?
Are you a fan of Pink Floyd?
Just us.
I am a huge fan of Pink Floyd, and I really do love Pink Floyd, but I wasn't an obsessive, I would say, before I joined the band, and so I had to do a little bit of research as well. But of course, I love the material. I mean, anybody with a huge appreciation of music is going to go, this stuff is really special, really, really special. So yeah, I think probably not as big a fan as some people before I joined, but for me, it's the music, and I think what's nice about that is because we've decided to go back and not to be slavish about trying to recreate the music from the records, but to recreate the
Spirit?
to recreate the spirit of the way Pink Floyd played then, and that was for Nick, I think, is something quite important. He likes being in a band and playing music and not being tied down and having, maybe we can pull something different out tonight about something. So, but yeah, I mean, what other songs could we play? There's a long list. We've talked about Careful with That Axe, Eugene, maybe, but I don't know. It's more of a piece of horror soundtrack. Appleton Orange, yeah. But, we could always get... Yeah, it's whether somebody wants to end up with nodules at the end of a tour on their throat and never be able to sing again, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, one fine day, if I got a chance to play Great Gig in the Sky on stage, I would love to play that.
Were there any songs from this Pre-Dark Side era that you tried on rehearsals but then dropped?
Yes. Careful with That Axe was one that we dropped.
Really?
Who was screaming?
I think we tried to get Nick to have a go at that. I can't remember now. It was quite a while ago.
Okay. We are talking about the Pink Floyd stuff, but did you have an option, an idea to create something totally new?
With this band?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there are still secrets in the saucer that so I don't know yet. I mean, Guy and I have written together for a long time. Guy and Gary have written together before. Lee's guested on my album, which will be coming out, well, when I finish it, when we get back off this tour. So we've all done stuff together before, so never say never is the answer. I think, we'd definitely like to go on and develop the show next year, so if we did take it out and we did want to go back to America, certainly we'd need to look at putting some new songs in there and looking at the back catalogue again. So maybe there would be new arrangements of some of these songs. We might add, a couple of other ones in there. Cymbeline is one that we've always thought about trying, and we've talked a lot about maybe doing some acoustic parts to the set. It really depends on where we play next year and how Nick is feeling, particularly. I mean, he does incredibly well considering he's no longer 25. But he's still playing amazingly, so we kind of take all that stuff into account,
Great news, because some people told us that it could be the last tour, so this is a hoax.
Well, I mean, the thing is, in the 60s and 70s, rock and roll was a flash in the pan. Nobody assumed that you'd be doing it for more than, well, if you were lucky, a year or 2 years, and now it's a lifetime career, which is a new thing. And I think certainly chatting to Nick, it surprised him that he still has an audience and is still playing all these years later. And it's the same for me as well. I mean, I'm not exactly 20 anymore and good looking, so
On stage you're surrounded by so many instruments, so how do you choose your equipment? My opinion is that it sounds a bit more modern than in Pink Floyd days, and this was I assume a conscious decision, but how do you pick instruments and equipment you use?
Yeah, well, do you know what? That's a really good question because, it's Pink Floyd, and a lot of the signature of Pink Floyd, and particularly with what Rick was doing, is his choice of sounds and his choice of instruments, and of course that actually evolved as time went by. But for us, there was also, and it sounds a little bit dull, there was a practical side to it, because Rick was playing Farfisas at one point, and then moving on to Vox Continentals, and then moving on to Hammonds, and I wanted all of those sounds on stage, and then there's VC5s and countless other vintage synthesizers, and these things are really hard to keep going on the road, particularly organs. I mean, they're an absolute nightmare. So it was kind of a practical decision, and because when it started there was going to be so much improvisation, and I wanted to be able to make up sounds on the fly, so I wanted as many things as I could get my fingers on stage. I think we're one of very few bands these days. There are no backing tracks. There is nothing on tape. There's no press space bar at the beginning of the song and play along to it. So it was a really practical decision. And we had a limited amount of space on stage as well. My stuff had to fit on a 9-foot by 9-foot riser, and I'm filling that. So I chose the best dual manual digital organ I could find that had all the drawbars, because a big part of playing Hammond organ is, I don't know if your listeners know, but as you pull out the stops, it doesn't just pull out more pipes and build the sound larger and larger. It actually pulls out pipes that have harmonics, so they play other notes. So you can actually change the timbre and the harmonic content of a chord as you're playing by pulling stops out. So I really needed a dual manual organ, but the one that could do Farfisa, Vox Continental and Hammond, and also sound like it was going through an amplifier without having to have an amplifier on stage. It just makes everything more and more complicated with a tour of the size that we're doing. So that was that, and then it was a question of just choosing one proper analog synthesizer with plenty of knobs, but that still had a memory, so I could jump around. So that was the subsequent 37. We really want a depth of sound with the keyboards, which is reminiscent of what they managed to achieve in the studio. And of course, these days, the only way you can do that is if you use a computer as a mixing desk. Ultimately, which is the computer on stage is a mixing desk, but then you think, well, actually, rather than taking some workstation and you're tied to sounding like Korg or sounding like Yamaha or whatever, if you use plugins in there, soft synth instruments, then you've got that whole world of stuff, so that you can use it as a sampler as well as use plugins to create choir sounds and string sounds and Selena string sounds and all that kind of stuff. So that's really, it was a kind of mixture of being a little bit practical and also having plenty of stuff to play with, and then it's augmented by this really big old analog pedal board with Binson Echo Rec emulations on it, and as many valves, and I've got a bunch of Moog as well. Just as much analog stuff and as much hands-on stuff as I could, so we can improvise and just get some really crazy sounds. It's not like doing a play where you're trying to recreate precisely the same performance every single night. It keeps us fresh, particularly when you're doing a long tour. I mean, last year we did, I can't remember, but it was in the region of 100 shows, and so we keep it fresh. And the nice thing is that we think the show evolves every single night. It gets a little bit better every single night. Every single night after the show, we sit in the dressing room, the band, I really liked what you did there tonight. That was a bit different. That bit was not so good. Can we go back to what you were doing before? But it does, it keeps evolving all the time, which is really nice, and it keeps us interested and stops it becoming a job.
I think in a way is the most musical Floyd-related show, I would say, because David Gilmour's shows have these guitar solos that are improvised, and is a very important part. Roger Waters' shows are spectacles, and this is, I think, the most about music, and this is special, I would say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we really like to think so. It is a contrast to Roger's show, which is obviously so political and has such a message, and we like to think we're the friendly Floyd. We're the fun Floyd. And it's definitely it's a break away from the shows in the past where everybody was just wearing jeans and a black t-shirt.
Jeans and black.
Yeah, that was always the thing, And you know what? We're really enjoying it, and we don't care if you know it.
This is your third show in Poland because you were in Warsaw and in Łódź last year.
This is the third time in Poland. Yeah.
What are your memories from Poland?
Love it. Yeah. No, it's every time we've come, it's been beautiful. I think, Łódź, I don't remember much about, only because it was in the middle of a very busy tour, and I remember that we drove in by bus overnight, we drove out by bus overnight, and sometimes that happens on tour. But we had a little bit of time to explore Warsaw when we were there, and that blew my mind. The history of Warsaw and the history of the Polish people and the relationship between Poland and Britain especially. It moved all of us in the band hugely, especially the way that the historic centre of Warsaw had been completely rebuilt brick by brick and is so absolutely beautiful. And going to the War Museum in Warsaw as well, just to really remember what a huge contribution Polish people made to the outcome of the Second World War, which obviously is so important in both of our histories, and that really touched all of us in the band, a huge amount. So there's a big connection, and we're all so unhappy about the fact that we've left the European Union, because up until recently there was also a huge number of Polish people living in the UK, so there was a real connection. It was so great to have so many, Polski sklep, is that the right pronunciation? Yeah. Was a really familiar sight, particularly in London, and now so many Polish people have left the UK, which I think is really sad. We miss you guys, and it wasn't us; it was barely half the British people. So yeah.
I remember David Gilmour concert in Wrocław. Yeah. So also in Poland, and guy was wearing a specific T-shirt with a European Union flag, because that was the time that you made a Brexit. So it was a special shirt for that show.
Yeah. Don't worry, we're paying for it in the UK. We're paying for it really badly, but hey. Yeah. Let's not get political. Yeah, that's Roger's territory.
Friendly Pink Floyd. Okay, so we would like to ask you about Rick Wright, because you've worked with him. How was it? What kind of person was he, and what kind of artist was he, as you remember?
Rick was just an incredibly kind and gentle soul, just one of the nicest people that I've ever met. Really, really a lovely man, and a beautiful and very, very thoughtful musician, and a great artist. His writing was really key to Pink Floyd, and I think without his keyboard sound, it doesn't sound like Pink Floyd, particularly his Hammond playing and then later his Rhodes playing. But I think it's his style of writing and his approach to chord progressions that I think really broke the mould for rock music. He brought a thoughtfulness to that, without which Pink Floyd might well have sounded like a lot of other bands, and I think it set them apart very much. So it was a real pleasure to work with him. I wish we'd had time to finish the album he was planning on doing. It was a real pity. Just a loss far too soon.
What was the year of recording?
2008, yeah.
How far did you go? How did you get in working on this album?
Yeah, if I have a criticism, Rick, little bit of a prevaricator, if you know what that word means. So not as far as I would have liked, but there was a large body of ideas that he already had, and obviously Stephen Wilson's new surround mix of Wet Dreamers coming out shortly, so I'm really looking forward to hearing that. I'm going to hear that in surround on the day we get back from this tour. So who knows what will happen in the future. Obviously his legacy is in the hands of his wonderful children, who are really good friends of mine. So we wait to see what they think they might want to do in the future.
Were you also a musician on that project, or maybe a sound director or something like that?
No, I was more involved in, I guess, kind of producing and engineering with Rick, but it was very early stages, so there hadn't been a lot of decisions made at that point. We were messing around with ideas together and getting his studio together and trying to find places he felt comfortable to work. So, yeah, it was fairly early days.
How much of this material has been recorded?
I would say there's probably easily an album's worth that have Rick's playing on them, but not completely recorded. Yeah.
So it was instrumental album.
Yes. Yeah. All the stuff we've got so far is instrumental. I think there were a couple of lyric ideas here and there, but we haven't looked. To be honest with you, we haven't looked at it for a while, and I'm being a little bit reticent about saying too much, just because it really is Jamie and Gala's decision what happens with that. And you know, I feel very honoured that they trusted me after Rick passed away to go through the archive of material that we were working on and previous ideas that he had. So I think that's their area, and I will. You know, it's up to them to decide, and not to put lots of stuff out in the public about, you know, what I've heard and what's there.
It will be very, very good information if this material in some points could be released someday.
Yeah, there's lots of ways we could go with it, you know, in terms of preserving some of his playing and then recreating backing tracks or what have you. But it's very much something for the future, and it's very much, you know, in the hands of his family, really, what they decide to do.
You're co-creating one of Floyd-related shows. So have you been to others, like Roger Waters, David Gilmour shows, and did you enjoy them?
I've been to see David Gilmour several times, obviously, and just love it. I mean, his playing is absolutely legendary, and obviously Guy was playing with him, so
so was it on an island tour? On an island tour?
Yeah, I saw it on an island tour, yeah, and the one before that as well, yeah. So just incredible. I haven't been to see any of Roger's tours. I just don't feel like being shouted at that much, but I hear they're absolutely fantastic, and you know, I've watched bits of them online, and for sure he's got a great set of musicians with him. So yeah.
Oh, one extra more questions. Your favorite Floyd or Floyd members' albums?
My favourite Floyd members' albums, or favourite Floyd albums?
Yeah.
Crikey. Do you know what?
Or solo albums?
Look, I would like to say something terribly muso and very obscure, and say, oh yes, no, I think Amagama is an unsung piece of genius. I'm really sorry. I love Dark Side of the Moon, inside out, back to front. Every moment of that album, I think, deserves to be up there as probably their greatest piece of work by a long stretch. I think it feels to me as if the moment at which the band really came together as four artists and contributed equally to an album that really brought the best of them working together. I think it was a moment where the four of them really, really clicked. I think every other album, you know, has fantastic moments, some of which are up there with Dark Side of the Moon, but as a complete piece of work, you know, as 45 minutes of music, two sides of an LP, that is about as perfect as it gets. Cliches are cliches for a reason, and the most best-selling albums and best-known albums are that for a reason. So, hey kids, don't be afraid to love Dark Side of the Moon. Although I've got to give an honorary mention to Pulse, I think, which is a really great live album. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dom Beken.
Yeah, really good to meet you, and I hope anybody who's coming to the shows really enjoys it. I hope anybody who's coming tonight really enjoys it, and yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.